Isle of Minnow introduced players to a young boy that found himself washed up upon the shores of a mysterious island. After exploring the area, he stumbles across a village inhabited by a group of locals that all offer various missions to complete. The main aspect of the experience seemed to focus upon various minigames, such as collecting feathers, mowing lawns, and various other activities that would benefit the locals. Not much else is known about the game, as this is all the information that can be gained from the leaked ISO that thankfully was dumped online. It was developed by Sumo Digital and was quietly cancelled in 2006. There's no real reason as to why it got canned, and all but vanished from the company's history, which is a real shame as it was clearly shaping up to be something special. After the somewhat dismal performance of Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness, it was decided by Core Design that the next installment in the franchise was to be a retelling of the first adventure that would both enhance and extend nearly every aspect of it. After nearly 9 months of development, the project was unfortunately cancelled by SCI, but many point to the reason being that Core Design was sold to a different company, which likely resulted in the publisher Eidos not wanting the game to continue. As a huge fan of the original Tomb Raider games, it's a real shame this version never got to see the light of day. All we have left of the project is a trailer that showed Lara taking on dinosaurs, displaying her acrobatic abilities, and visiting a whole range of unique locations. Following the cancellation, the idea of a remake of the original game would eventually see the light of day thanks to the efforts of Crystal Dynamics, who would go on to release Tomb Raider Anniversary, but still, it would have been nice to see the project come to life in its initial form. Shaolin Streets was a beat-em-up that was originally planned to release both on the PlayStation 2 as well as the PSP. Developed by JL Games, it was eventually cancelled, and it was decided that the project should move towards the next generation of consoles, which sadly never got a release as well. From the gameplay available, players were to take up the role of a character known as Lee, with the intention of cleaning the streets up. A selection of fighting moves inspired by Kung Fu were implemented, as well as ways in which to traverse the environment, such as a handy wall jump and climbing mechanic that seemed to offer players many ways in which to take everyone on. Now, not much is really known as to why it never saw the light of day, and is instead often put down to the economic issues of the time that could have been affecting the company. Advent Shadow was originally in development by Majesco and was to be a companion piece to a game known as Advent Rising that was subsequently releasing on home consoles. But before it had the chance to be finished, it was cancelled and would go on to join the list of games that were never meant to be. Thankfully, quite a bit of information was known about the project, and it would have seen players assuming the role of Marin Steele on a quest to save humanity from an impending alien invasion. Essentially a third-person action adventure. From what we know, it looks like a huge range of futuristic weapons were going to be at the player's disposal, and a focus upon minute-to-minute gunplay was going to be a huge part of the experience. The only real reason available as to why it was cancelled is that Majesco ran into financial difficulties, resulting in the project having to be axed. Duke Nukem Critical Mass was initially in development for both the Nintendo DS as well as the PSP. To this day, it is unknown as to why the project was cancelled, with only a few screenshots and a trailer showing what was initially developed. Quite a bit is known about the game though, due to several design documents that detailed the entire experience. It was going to be comprised of 9 areas that would all be divided into 27 missions, which in typical Duke Nukem fashion would see a whole range of weapons being available to the player, as well as many ways in which to accomplish missions due to the freedom present in each level. After its initial debut, the PSP version of the experience would slowly disappear. As mentioned, there's no real reason as to why it happened, and Duke Nukem Critical Mass would go on to become another game never to surface on the PSP. Back in 2005, following the release of Sly 3: Honor Among Thieves, an untitled entry in the series was being developed for the PSP by Vigil Games. Not much at all is known about it, apart from a short summary of its premise that likely would have seen Bentley's character creating a time machine in which Sly would have been able to visit various periods throughout history. It all sounds very similar to the future title of Thieves in Time on the PlayStation 3 and Vita, but this generally is what is believed, mainly due to the concept art that was released regarding the project. The most intriguing piece of art is a character that has since become known as Dark Sly, and most likely would have served as the game's antagonist, but like many other games on this list, we'll unfortunately never know what became of the project. originally starting out life as a port of the second entry in the Saints Row series. Undercover soon became its own unique experience due to the limitations of the hardware and not being able to replicate everything from the second iteration. The game would have seen players visiting locations that were present in both Saints Row 1 and 2, with a couple of newly designed areas to make it stand out as an entirely new adventure. As you would expect, a diverse amount of guns and melee weapons were going to be included, as well as a promising narrative that would see players starting out as a cop that soon succumbed to a life of crime. But it was not meant to be. The project was supposedly canned due to it not meeting the standards that had been set by the series, and it was a shame as it was shaping up to be something quite special. Saints Row Undercover did receive a happy ending though, as thankfully a few years back the developers of the game dumped it online, allowing all PSP owners to finally jump into the adventure, albeit in an unfinished state, but it's still nice to have the option. Elder Scrolls Oblivion was originally announced for the PSP by the official PlayStation magazine in 2006. They stated that it was going to be an entirely different experience when compared to what fans were accustomed to. Instead of offering an open world in which to explore, it would instead focus upon several levels that were all essentially self-contained slices of the areas in the main version of the game. Gameplay-wise, a range of melee weapons and magical abilities would have been available to the player in which to take on enemies, but due to the lack of inputs on the PSP system, the control scheme was going to share much in common with the likes of Metroid Prime, with the player being required to hold down the shoulder button in order to look around the environment. Now, there is no definitive reason as to why this game was cancelled, just rumours that developers Climax Studios ran into difficulties during its development. Judging by the short trailer that was initially released back in 2008, Ushiro looked like it was going to be a turn-based RPG with a huge focus upon horror. Developed by Level 5, players would be taking up the role of a young boy known as Ushiro that had the ability to grant a wish to those on the brink of death in exchange for their lives. Gameplay-wise, it looked like it was going to focus on exploring the various locations that would have been present, with several actions open to the player, including possessing NPCs, listening in on conversations, and finally fighting the evil within people's hearts that were to take the form of monsters. This is where the turn-based battling system would have come into play, and from our brief look at it during the trailer, it clearly could have been one of the best aspects of the game. Shortly after its reveal, everything about Ushiro went dark, and it would slowly fall into obscurity, with the inevitable soon becoming obvious that it had been unfortunately cancelled. Not a lot is known about the PSP version of Capcom's survival horror juggernaut that was originally announced way back in 2009. At the Electronic Entertainment Expo, Sony took to the stage to announce that a new entry in the Resident Evil franchise was landing on the PSP. Simply titled Resident Evil Portable, we learned that the game was in the early development stage and was being developed with the newly announced UMD-free PSP Go in mind. 11 years later, we still have no information as to what Resident Evil Portable was about, or a reason as to why it never came to fruition, which is a real shame as it had the potential to be something truly special, and in my mind perhaps would have been a continuation of the popular Outbreak series that focused upon online and cooperative play, which would have been a perfect fit for the handheld machine, but I guess we'll never know what became of it.